Today I am recounting a deeply unsettling experience that happened to me, and I assure you it is entirely genuine. This is not a fictional narrative, but a real event that left a lasting impact on me. Prepare for a story that is both chilling and authentically true. It all began earlier today. I've always been a skeptic, dismissing the idea of ghosts and supernatural entities as nothing more than figments of imagination. That was until today. Being a teenager, I have a penchant for seeking out a little bit of mischief, but I never anticipated that I'd find myself in such a deep and unsettling situation. The day itself began like any other ordinary school day. I followed my usual routine without any hint of the strange events that would unfold later. The shift began in the afternoon when my friends and I decided to participate in the latest viral craze, the Charlie Challenge. We were your typical teenagers, and like many others, we thought it would be harmless fun to try it out. During one of our classes, we gathered together with a mix of excitement and skepticism. We set up our makeshift Ouija board with paper and pencils, ready to delve into this supposed paranormal game. At first, we asked the standard question, Charlie, are you there? Initially, there was no response, and we were starting to think it was just a hoax. However, as we continued, we finally received an answer, a resounding yes. We laughed it off, though the eerie confirmation still lingered in our minds. As the class period drew to a close, we posed the question of whether we could leave. The response was a clear and unsettling no. At that moment, we were merely curious and somewhat amused, not realizing the gravity of what we had invoked. We should have heeded the warning and stopped right there. After school, we regrouped, eager to continue the game and finally head home. We resumed our session with a sense of unease, but we pressed on, asking simple questions in hopes of concluding our little experiment. Despite our attempts to end the game, each time we asked if we could leave, the answer remained a disconcerting no. The atmosphere grew increasingly tense as we began probing with darker questions, such as, "Were you murdered? And are you watching us?" The chilling yes responses to these questions only heightened our anxiety. Things took a turn for the bizarre as the game progressed. We noticed objects moving on their own, and unsettling voices seemed to echo around us. At one point, a book fell off a shelf, and the candles lining the hallway extinguished themselves one by one. We attempted to downplay the odd occurrences, joking and trying to brush off our fears. Despite our efforts, the eerie answers continued, and we felt a growing sense of dread. Eventually, we received the answer we had been waiting for. Charlie finally said yes to the question, Charlie, may we leave? However, we had neglected to complete the most crucial step of the ritual, saying goodbye. When I walked home with my friends, we discussed the game and the strange experiences we had just encountered, trying to convince ourselves it was all just a series of coincidences. However, as soon as I arrived home, an intense feeling of unease washed over me. It was as though an unseen presence was following me. I tried to ignore the unsettling sensation, choosing instead to watch TV and eat, but the feeling of being watched persisted. As night settled in, the eerie feeling only intensified. I couldn't shake the sensation of something lurking nearby. Strange noises filled my ears, and shadows seemed to move around my room. The presence was undeniable, and I found it nearly impossible to get any rest, overwhelmed by the persistent feeling of being watched and the unnerving presence in my space. I don't know how much longer I can endure this. Some people might think I've lost my grip on reality, but I assure you I'm not crazy. Even at 21, the memory of an experience that defies all logic still haunts me. It all started back in 8th grade when I played a game called Charlie with my friend Lily. At the time, it seemed like nothing more than harmless fun, but we had no idea it would open the door to something dark. We began the game by placing 2 pencils on a piece of paper with yes and no written on it. To start, we slowly chanted, Charlie, are you there? At first, nothing happened. We laughed, thinking it was all just a silly game. But then, out of nowhere, the pencil started to move, like it was being pushed by an invisible force. Our laughter died down, replaced by an eerie chill that filled the room. The pencil slid over to yes. We suddenly felt like we were no longer alone, as if something, or someone, was trying to communicate with us. We wanted to stop, but then things started getting really strange. The pencil on the paper began to spin on its own, and the air around us grew heavy. Lily suddenly screamed, claiming she felt someone behind her. When I turned to look, no one was there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched by something unseen. That night, after we put the pencils and paper away, we tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come easy. I kept feeling like someone was walking around my room. At 3 a.m., I woke up to find my bedroom door wide open. I was certain I had closed it. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadowy figure in the mirror, but when I turned to look directly, there was nothing. Over the next few days, the strange occurrences only escalated. I kept hearing unexplainable noises around the house, pencils scraping, doors creaking shut, even whispers calling my name. Lily told me she was experiencing the same bizarre events at her place. She said Charlie had probably attracted something dark into our lives. One day we decided to play the game again, thinking we could get some answers. We asked, Charlie, are you angry? The pencil pointed to yes once more. That's when we knew we were in over our heads. From that moment, we lived in constant fear. My mom decided to have the house blessed, but it didn't seem to make much of a difference. The nightmares became more intense, waking up in the middle of the night, hearing glass shattering, and worst of all, finding strange scratch marks on our bodies that neither of us could explain. Finally, Lily and I decided we'd never play Charlie again. We burned the paper and pencils, trying to rid ourselves of whatever darkness we had summoned. But the memories still linger, as if that dark presence never truly left. From this experience, I've learned one thing. Messing with the supernatural is never safe. You never know when or how it might bring danger into your life. You might recall that bizarre phenomenon known as the Charlie game, which took the internet by storm back in 2018. For those unfamiliar with it, the game involved drawing a grid on a sheet of paper with 2 yes squares and 2 no squares positioned diagonally across from each other. The challenge was to balance 2 pencils on top of each other in the shape of a cross. The idea was that by asking questions, if the spirit of Charlie was supposedly present, the top pencil would mysteriously move to point towards either yes or no, providing an answer. One day, my classmate Jessica, who had a knack for getting everyone involved in the latest trends, managed to convince nearly the entire class to join in on this peculiar game. Everyone except one student participated. Jessica had orchestrated a plan where we would all sit in a wide circle, holding hands to ensure no one could interfere with the pencils or paper. She also made sure to turn off any air conditioning or fans in the room to eliminate any possibility of the pencils being moved by a draft. Before we began, Jessica turned to me and gave me specific instructions. Ethan, you're going to be the one responsible for making sure no one messes with the paper or the pencils. Everyone else will close their eyes, and your job is to keep watch, making sure nothing and no one interferes. I agreed to the task, curious to see what would happen next. Jessica then initiated the game by leading the chant, Charlie, are you here? As everyone else in the room closed their eyes, I kept mine wide open, watching intently. I made sure to check that no one was making any subtle movements, and I confirmed there wasn't a single breeze in the room that could possibly affect the pencils. My attention was focused on the pencils, and then, to my shock, the top pencil moved. At first, it shifted just a tiny bit, almost as if it was about to settle back in place, but then it moved again, this time more noticeably, sliding over to one side before coming to a complete stop. I was so startled that I began to whisper-yell to Jessica, trying to get her attention without breaking the concentration of the group. She whisper-yelled back that she wasn't finished with the ritual yet, clearly skeptical that anything had happened. I insisted, telling her again that the pencil had indeed moved. Jessica was surprised and asked, "Really?" in a tone that made it clear she hadn't actually expected anything to occur. We both thought this was just a silly game with no real outcome, but there it was. The pencil had moved. I stood up to get a closer look at the paper. and sure enough, the pencil had come to rest on yes. The whole class erupted in a mix of excitement and fear. None of us had really believed the game would work, but it did, and we were all left wondering how it could have happened. To this day, I can't come up with any logical explanation for what moved those pencils. Unfortunately, the excitement didn't last long. The one student who had opted out of the game, Logan, ended up telling the teacher about what we had done, and we all got into trouble. Still, that experience is something I'll never forget, and it continues to puzzle me whenever I think about it.